I'm looking at maybe changing that to a ceramic or polyethylene plate if I can get away with it when I buy the new carrier, which is going to be sometime this week now that I've been issued the new vest. So now I'm going to take a few comments from the Instagram live stream. Stick around. We're going to filter them out to just the ones that are pertinent for you all. All right, so we're going over to the Instagram live feed. I'm going to take some comments and questions from all of you. Robert Faust says, great idea on live streaming the behind the scenes of your videos. You should do it on more. I do this all the time. I don't normally integrate them into the YouTube videos, but if you follow me on Instagram and on Facebook, I take comments all the time. And if you follow the podcast, freefieldtrainingpodcast.com, you can hear all of the live streams that I do, and we make them into podcast form, and I take a bunch of comments, and some of it is available only on the podcast. So freefieldtrainingpodcast.com, there's exclusive content up there that you won't find on the other social media outlets for Free Field Training. Armor World says you should add a pocket Constitution holster. I don't have a pocket Constitution because I read it. Those of us who actually read it don't need a pocket Constitution holder. What I do have is a copy of the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and a lot of pertinent case law on this little flash drive. These things really are a lifesaver. If I find an article that I find of especially good value, I'll copy it and put it onto the flash drive, and I'll make sure that I copy the second and third page of it too that has all the citations so I can look back at them if I need it. Stay up on case law, stay up on constitutional law, so we make sure that the stuff that we're doing on the street that we don't do all the time, we're still doing properly. Because there's lots of stuff. I don't do a lot of DUIs, and DUI case law changes constantly. So I make sure I always keep all of it on here, so that way I have my reference material. I have to carry a lot less paper now that I have the flash drive. And I can vet the stuff that I put on the flash drive and make sure it's a good source. Unlike people that'll just look things up on their phone and take the word of it of whoever it is that posted an article on the internet, I can vet the stuff that's on here, check the references that they put on it, make sure it's good, and then I upload it on the flash drive so I know I'm only keeping my good information and I'm keeping it all up to date. I also keep copies of this in my safe at home and on my computer. So if I lose this, I'm not up a creek. I can just make another one. Corey says Amazon has lots of options for Molly pouches. Anything you can imagine, they have a pouch that may work. P.S. My name is Corey. Nice to know, Corey. Well, here's the thing. We're only allowed to use certain pouches. We're allowed to have Molly, and I think the pouches are going to be high-speed gear. At least for right now. Maybe they're just seeing how that goes. So I'm kind of constrained to only certain pouches that I can use, and some of them we're restricted from using. Like I have to use the taser holster that I'm currently using. I have to use this taser holster. I don't get to use another one that's an aftermarket one, even if high-speed gear makes it. So thanks for the suggestion. I don't think I'm going to be able to do that, but in the future that might not be a bad idea if we lax up some of the policies. Henry Schuyler says, I see you use a Safariland SLS holster. Is the SLS and ALS or just SLS? I use the same but have considered switching to the SLS and ALS model. Your thoughts? I use a Safariland SLS holster because I'm kind of a middle-of-the-road guy when it comes to holster technology. I'm all right with the ALS and I'm all right with the SLS, but I'm not all right with like quadruple retention holsters. For me personally, I've tried using triple and quadruple retention holsters, and they slow me down. I know that might not be a thing for everybody, and a lot of people are going to say, hey, that's a training issue. Well, guess what? I'm the training guy. No one is going to go to the range and play around more than I do. I can assure you of that. I have lots of time on it, and for whatever reason, my fat thumbs and my old brain do not coordinate pushing forward and pushing back and playing all sorts of games with the holster. The great thing that I love about the SLS is that having come from a background of using just a thumb snap holster, in fact, when I started on the job, I used just a thumb snap holster. The SLS, you have to know what you're doing with it, but it's a lot of the same motion. And it's just that one break motion that allows you to get the gun out of the holster. So I really like the SLS. Plus, the SLS, when you pull on the gun, it becomes more secure if you haven't defeated the retention first. So it's a very secure retention holster because it physically keeps the gun in without just locking onto a little bobble. It's a bail over the top of the pistol. You can see here. And the tighter you pull up on it, the tighter it locks the gun into place. I'm a big fan of the SLS. I know people that are big fans of just using ALS, and if that's you, then have at. Safariland, I think, makes awesome holsters. I'd have no problem going to just the ALS system, but the SLS works so much closer to the way that I had been trained and all of the training that I've had and all the practice that I've had for so many years. I see no reason to switch it up now and go to an SLS ALS system. I have before used a holster that had the guard on it. This one, for some reason, doesn't have the setups to have the guard on it, and that has the Sentry device. And the Sentry device, a few guys at work have, and I've considered it before, so that when you're going into a crowd, you can pop the Sentry on to give yourself an extra level of protection. I don't think that's a bad idea either. But as a general rule, what I don't like with retention holsters is when you have a retention holster that requires you to do multiple movements that can't be accomplished simultaneously. And that's kind of what you get into with the SLS ALS system. If it works for you, that's great. And Safariland makes them, and they're great, reliable holsters. I've had this holster for a long time. You can see it's got almost no wear on it. But I stay away from that because a man's got to know his limitations, and that's kind of mine. In a stressful situation, I want to be able to just pop the holster open using the same motor skills I've always used and be able to get that gun out. And this does that for me while also keeping it pretty securely retained. Henry Schuyler says, I use the Sentry device too. Hey, great minds think alike. Of course, so do mediocre ones, so you and I might be in the same boat in the wrong way. Armed Nerd 1988 says, what do you think about setting up my duty belt with the gun on the right like normal and the taser set up for left-handed draw? I'm sort of pudgy and it's kind of hard to cross draw. So here's the thing. All you have to worry about where you set your taser up with is that you're not going to confuse it with your gun no matter what, because that's how we can get ourselves into really, really serious trouble. What he's talking about is, as you can see on my belt, I got my pistol one way. So imagine this is me. The gun's on this side with butt pointed back. Taser's on this side with butt pointed forward. So when I draw my pistol, I reach down, pull it out, and the pistol's out. When I draw my taser, I cross over myself, push a different type of retention button. Notice this one I operate with my thumb, this one I operate with my index finger, and cross draw the taser. The idea being there that I can never confuse the two in the heat of the moment. This is my preferred method. Now, some people prefer to have the pistol on one side and the taser on the other side, meant for left-handed use. Of everybody who would use that, you'd think the guy that's kind of ambidextrous would want to do it that way. I don't, just as an added measure of safety. I know lots of people at work who, because they're using a different hand for the taser and their gun and using a different operating system for the taser and the gun, they're perfectly comfortable with that. And if policy said I had to do it that way, I would. It's not my preference, but we've never really gotten any arguments about it at work, and I've never seen it as a problem that you're drawing the taser with your left hand instead of with cross draw with your right hand. If that works well for you, that's great. Just be careful that you're good with that taser with your left hand, because you only get one shot at it most of the time. Some of the new ones are 2 or 3 shotters, but those are not really popular yet. Most people are using a single shot taser, single cartridge. You get one shot at it, make sure you make it good. You have to be good with your left hand to be able to do it like that. Think about with it is you don't want to have your pistol and your taser out at the same time and pointed at the person at the same time. The problem we get into is we get under high stress, and when we go to squeeze one trigger, we might go to squeeze the other trigger. Now, trigger discipline will help us a lot. If we're properly indexing our fingers on the gun, we don't have as much problem with sudden jerking motions and setting the gun off when we go to set the taser off. But as an added measure of safety, if you're going to have your taser so you can draw it with your left hand the same way you would a pistol, make sure when you draw that taser out, you're putting your pistol away, taking your pistol and pushing it down away from whatever you're targeting when you punch the taser out. We want our brain to have as little things to confuse as possible in the heat of the moment, especially when we're using force. John JB says, just got the TLR2 HLG for my Glock 17. Thanks for your video. We did a video about the TLR2 HLG and the difference between it and the standard Streamlight TLR2. For outdoors, I find this TLR2 HLG, which is a higher output light with a brighter laser, works a lot better. For a lot of the stuff that I do that's up close in houses, it doesn't really help that much and it burns out batteries a lot faster. If I worked more traffic stops, let's say I was a state trooper at night, I would definitely want the HLG for the same purpose. Thanks for the comment. Bryce Bishel says, pretty much everybody on my department puts their taser on their vest. You might want to try that. That's one of the things that I have to use this holder, and this holder will not allow me to mount it onto Molly. You can see it. It's only really made to clip onto a belt. So if policy changes in the future, which it very well may, I may move it to my vest. I used to have it on my vest when I was in SWAT. I had it actually on the right-hand side, so I could cross-draw without having to cross-draw over all of the gear that you have on the front of a vest for SWAT. If I went to Mali and I was allowed to put on my vest, I might put it right back there. I really like that location for a taser. Unfortunately, it's just not supported by most people's SOEs. Zach David 12 says, I started working a private security contractor and I have to supply my own holster. What is your opinion on drop leg versus on the hip? Drop leg holsters are a bad idea for most people for a wide variety of reasons. I highly suggest, especially if you are new to security or law enforcement work, that you get a holster that attaches to your hip. There's a couple reasons that people use drop leg holsters. One is they're going to be repelling. Another is that they're going to be scuba diving. Another is that their armor doesn't fit right. It's too long, and so it gets in the way of the pistol in the holster on their belt. Unless you're doing the first two, or your armor doesn't fit very well at all and you're required to use it for work, there's really no reason to have a drop leg holster. Now, I've used a drop leg holster before. I had it for a couple of months when I first started on SWAT, and I learned the error of my ways the very hard way. Especially if you're used to having a pistol on your hip, going to a drop leg holster can cause a lot of problems. One is that it flops around when you run, which isn't pleasant. Another is that you're at full extension with your arm when you put it in, and it's hard to feel if the gun's actually in there or just ran along the side of it. I actually had an incident in training where I dropped my pistol because I had just started using a drop leg holster. There's an example to you. I'm not infallible, and I make mistakes, and that was a mistake that I made, and I'm glad to bring it all to you so you don't make that same mistake. I don't suggest drop leg holsters unless you have a very, very pertinent reason for using the drop leg holster beyond, I think it looks cool. Jonas Senbadi says, any tricks for detecting fake ID? Any questions to test somebody better than usual? The key with fake IDs is knowing what the ID is supposed to look like in the first place. If I made an ID for Rhode Island, I think it would probably fool 99% of people because no one knows what a Rhode Island ID looks like. But most fake IDs are not going to be weird from Rhode Island, and you don't have to let someone into your business or take their ID at face value if you suspect that it could be fake. So if you're in Oregon and there's some person that looks like they're underage and they're in a bar and they give you a Rhode Island ID, you can probably not take their word at it. And there's various databases and things that we can use to try to track whether someone's giving us their real name or not. Worst case scenario, we can bring them in and fingerprint them if we think that there's a crime that's been committed. Henry says, do you have OC? I keep mine in my support side behind my mags. My thought process is I shouldn't have anything in my gun hand in case things go bad. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Thoughts? I don't use OC for a whole lot of anything in police work other than getting people out of closets who decide they're going to go hide in there when we search a house. Never really had circumstance to use it when I'm fighting with someone. I haven't found it to be particularly effective. We're going to do more videos on that in the future. If you like using OC, my suggestion would be to keep it away from where it's going to interfere with your other equipment. And one real quick tip, those OC cans come with a flip top. You want to make sure you put it somewhere where that flip top, nothing's going to get in there and discharge that can of OC, especially when you're in your squad car, because that can make for a very, very bad day. All right, and that's about it for our live stream questions and answers. Thank you all for sticking around. Until next week and next video, you all be safe and take care of each other. I'd like to thank all the Patreon supporters, and especially the shift supervisor level Patreon supporters that we have listed here. Your contributions are what allows free field training to continue on and become better. Thank you.